The blood on her knuckles wasn't from cleaning. Ethan Mercer had seen plenty in his 43 years. Cattle drives, bar fights, the brutal honesty of ranch life. But nothing prepared him for the woman who showed up at his door that October morning. Hannah Cole's hands were raw. Her eyes were hollow. Yet she worked like survival itself depended on every scrubbed floorboard. When she refused his offer of lunch, he noticed the way she pocketed the apple from his counter. When she disappeared before dusk, he saw her glance over her shoulder. Not once, but 3 times. Something was hunting her. And when Ethan followed her into those woods that night, what he discovered would change everything he thought he knew about love, sacrifice, and what it truly means to protect someone. 4 children, a crumbling shack, and a secret that would put them all in terrible danger. If you want to know what happened when the past finally caught up with Hannah Cole, stay with me until the very end. This story reminds us that true love isn't about saving someone. It's about standing beside them while they save themselves. Family isn't built by blood. It's built by the people who show up, who stay, and who choose each other every single day, especially when it's hard. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that matters. The storm had left his guest cabin looking like a pile of toothpicks. Standing in the mess of glass and splintered wood, Ethan figured a bulldozer was his best bet. That's when a voice, quiet as a field mouse, said, "Mr. Mercer?" He turned around to see a woman standing there. She was at the edge of his long gravel driveway, holding an old canvas bag and squinting in the sun. She was thin, but not in a healthy way. This was the kind of thin that comes from going hungry for too long. Her jeans were held up by a belt pulled to the very last hole, and her flannel shirt was more patches than original fabric. But her eyes are what got him. Maybe 30 years old, with a look that said she'd stopped expecting anything good from the world. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Ethan asked, his voice low and steady. "Heard you might need a hand," she said, nodding toward the wrecked cabin. "Cleaning up, repairs. I work hard." Ethan looked down at her hands. Her knuckles were raw and scabbed. These weren't the hands of someone just looking for a little extra cash. "And who'd you hear that from?" "Martha, down at the feed store." That made sense. Martha knew everything and everyone. Still, looking at how this woman stood, ready to run at any second, he knew this wasn't one of Martha's usual setups. "What's your name?" "Hannah Cole." "You got experience, Hannah Cole?" "I've cleaned, done repairs, a little bit of everything," she said plainly. "I work hard, and I don't steal." She looked him square in the eye when she said that last part. Ethan recognized that look. It was the look of someone tired of being judged before they even got a chance. "It pays $15 an hour," he said, "cash at the end of the day." A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Fair. The cabin needs to be completely cleared out. Tools are in the barn. Cleaning stuff is in the mudroom. You can start when you're ready." She just nodded and walked toward the cabin, moving with a purpose. He watched as she carefully tested the first porch step before putting her full weight on it. Smart woman, he thought, trying to get back to his own chores, but he couldn't shake a bad feeling. By lunchtime, he found himself walking by the cabin. Hannah was on her knees sweeping up glass with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Later, he saw her scrubbing mold off the kitchen cabinets, her shoulders tight with effort. When he cleared his throat to speak, she jumped like a startled deer. "Need something, Mr. Mercer?" "Just checking on you. You need anything?" "No, sir." That "sir" sat wrong with him. "Ethan is fine." "Yes, sir," she said again. He gave up and decided to just bring her a sandwich. He found her wedged under the bathroom sink, fighting with a rusty pipe. "Brought you some lunch," he said from the doorway. She slid out, her face smudged with grime. Her eyes locked on the sandwich like a starving animal. "That's kind, but I'm all right." "When was the last time you ate?" he asked gently. She mumbled something about breakfast, but her eyes gave her away. It was a lie. "Just eat it," he said, setting it on the counter. "I can't have you fainting on me." She finally took the sandwich, and for a second she closed her eyes with such pure relief that Ethan had to look away. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're making good time," he said. "Better than I expected." But she was already sliding back under the sink, the sandwich held in her teeth. The workday was over. The sun was setting as Hannah walked out of the cabin. Ethan was waiting in the barn. She'd worked for 8 solid hours without a single break. "Finished for today?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I'll be back at 7 tomorrow, if that's all right." Ethan pulled out his wallet and counted out 8 $20 bills, plus a little extra. Her eyes widened. "That's too much." "You earned it." "I'm the boss. I can give a bonus if I want to," he said, holding the money out. "Take it, Hannah." Her fingers trembled as she took the cash, folding it carefully and tucking it deep into her pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." "Ethan." "Thank you, Ethan." She turned to leave, and that's when he saw it. A quick, nervous glance over her shoulder, checking the empty road and the dark trees beyond. "You need a ride somewhere?" he asked before he could stop himself. "No, thank you. I have a way." She started walking faster, clutching that old bag. Ethan watched her go down his driveway and turn left, not toward town, but toward the dark, winding country roads. He knew he should let it go. It was none of his business. But that fearful look in her eyes stuck with him all evening. Something was very wrong. The next morning, Hannah showed up 13 minutes early. Ethan knew because he'd been on his porch since 5, coffee in hand, watching the road. She walked toward the cabin, already pulling on her gloves. "Morning," he called out. She just gave a quick nod and got right back to work. "Model." She jumped like a spooked deer before her face settled into a careful blankness. "Morning, Mr. Mercer." He nodded. "I told you, call me Ethan." "Right, Ethan." She said his name like it was foreign. She went straight into the cabin, moving like water from one job to the next. By mid-morning, she had already torn out 3 ruined cabinets and scrubbed the old floor until it gleamed. At noon, he brought her a sandwich. This time she took it, but only ate half, saving the rest. "For later?" he asked. "Something like that." He told her there was plenty more. "I know, but waste is a sin." The words sounded like they were learned by heart, maybe from scripture. He knew that sound. His grandmother quoted the Bible with every breath, while his father used church to shake the right hands. Ethan had left all that behind a long time ago. But Hannah was different. She was someone who knew about lean times and couldn't quite trust a full plate. "You religious?" The question came out rough. Her eyes flickered. "I was raised to be." "That's not a real answer." "No, it ain't." She turned back to her work, a closed door he knew not to push on. For 3 days it was the same. She worked like a storm, took his lunch with quiet thanks, and left before dark with a nervous glance over her shoulder. On the 4th day, he decided to follow her. He wasn't proud of it, but he had a growing certainty that she was in some kind of trouble. So, when she left, moving fast with her shoulders hunched against the world, Ethan gave her a head start. He climbed into his truck and kept his distance, following her down the county road and onto a gravel track that twisted into the hills. He killed his lights, letting the moonlight guide him. The path got rough with branches scratching at his truck. Just when he thought he'd lost her, he saw a flicker of light through the trees. He parked the truck and walked the rest of the way. The cabin was a wreck, smaller than his tool shed, with a sagging roof and gaps in the walls. And on the porch, he saw them, 4 little children. The oldest girl, maybe 8 years old, held a baby on her hip. 2 little boys were roughhousing in the dirt. The baby, barely a year old, reached for Hannah as she climbed the steps. The sound that child made was pure joy. "Mama." The oldest girl's voice, high and achingly young, cut through the quiet air. "Hi, baby." Hannah's own voice was softer now, warmer. She took the baby and just held her, breathing her in. "We made dinner. the girl said. Beans and rice. Tommy tried to eat it all. Did not, one of the boys yelled back. Sam's a liar. Language, Hannah said, but her voice was full of tired love. Come on, let's get inside before the cold gets in. The door closed, leaving Ethan alone in the woods with a truth that changed everything. She wasn't running from something, she was running to them. He crept closer, peeking through a gap in the cardboard window. The inside was one small room with a wood stove and sleeping bags on the floor. But the children didn't notice. They swarmed their mama, showing her drawings and telling stories. She listened to every one, even as she pulled out the other half of her sandwich. She tore it into 4 small pieces and handed them out like a sacrament. The kids ate them in seconds. Ethan knew with a sickening feeling that it was likely the only real protein they would have all day. Mama, I'm still hungry, the smallest boy whispered. I know, sweetheart. We'll have beans soon. But Sarah, the oldest, shot him a warning look. Sam, hush. We're all hungry, she snapped, then looked down. Sorry, Mama. It's okay, baby, Hannah said gently. We're all just tired. Tell you what, she said, her voice brightening. Tomorrow I'll ask Mr. Mercer if he has extra eggs. We can have breakfast for dinner. The children's faces lit up like she had promised them the world. She was offering them eggs, and they looked at her like she'd hung the moon. Ethan backed away, a quiet fury building inside him. He made it to his truck, his hands shaking. 4 kids. Living in a shack not fit for animals, eating beans and rice. Hannah was earning maybe $300 a week from him. It was an impossible sum to raise a family on. She was failing, and still she showed up every morning with her head held high, ready to work. He felt useless. He couldn't just give her money. Her pride wouldn't allow it. And reporting her would mean they'd take the kids, which would break her completely. So what could he do? The answer came to him as he started the engine. He would just give her more work. The next morning, he was waiting on the porch when she arrived. She froze, a flash of fear in her eyes. Something wrong? She asked. Got a proposition for you, he said, keeping his voice casual. This cabin's nearly done, but the main house could use a deep cleaning. The stables need a good mucking out, too. It's extra hours if you want them. Same pay. Her eyes narrowed as she did the math in her head. More money meant more time away from her kids. How many hours, she asked. As many as you're willing to give. Full time if you want. I have obligations in the evenings. You just work a schedule that fits for you. He watched her, hoping she couldn't see the real reason on his face. Finally, she gave a slow nod. I could work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Maybe a half-day Saturday if you need me. That would be perfect. When can you start on the house? The cabin is almost done. Give me 2 more days. Sounds good. She turned to leave, then stopped. Ethan, why are you doing this? Being kind. The question hit him hard. Maybe I just need the help. She did not sound convinced, but she let it go. I will see you on Monday. He spent the weekend planning. The main house was huge, with 6 bedrooms and a kitchen bigger than her whole cabin. The guest wing had not been touched since his mother passed 3 years ago, just gathering dust while he rattled around his own life like a ghost. There was plenty of space, but he had to know who Hannah Cole really was, and more importantly, who put that hunted look in her eyes. Sunday afternoon, he found Martha Yates at the feed store. Ethan Mercer, she called out as he walked in. Twice in 2 weeks. Should I call the newspapers? Very funny, Martha. What can I do for you, sugar? That woman you sent me, Hannah Cole. What is her story? Martha's smile vanished. She led him to the back office and closed the door. Why are you asking? She is working for me. I like to know who is on my property. Bull. You are asking because you are interested. Martha, do not start with me. I have known you since you were a 17-year-old boy with a chip on your shoulder big enough to build a barn on. I know that look. You are getting involved. Ethan sighed. Just tell me what you know. Martha's face softened. She showed up about 6 months ago, looking for any kind of work. She is a hard worker, quiet and reliable, and she has got 4 kids living in that old Peterson cabin. You know the one. It should be torn down, but the taxes are paid, so no one checks on it. She is doing her best, Ethan, but raising 4 kids alone is tough. Where is the father? That is the question. She never talks about it, but I have seen women on the run before. Hannah has that look. That confirmed the heavy feeling in Ethan's gut. Any family? Near as I can tell, she is all alone. Martha patted his hand. Whatever you are planning, be careful. Women like Hannah have learned not to trust easily, especially not men with money offering to help. I am not trying to, I know. But she does not know that. Just go slow, and do not make promises you cannot keep. Those kids do not need another person letting them down. He drove home with Martha's words ringing in his ears. What exactly was he promising? Work? Shelter? Safety? He did not know yet. He just knew that on Monday morning Hannah would show up for a simple cleaning job, and he would do everything he could to give her more without her ever knowing what he was really doing. It felt wrong, like he was crossing a line, but he did it anyway. On Monday, Hannah arrived at 8 sharp. Where should I start? The guest wing, on the 2nd floor. It has not been used for years. She nodded and went upstairs. Ethan tried to focus on his own work, but he kept listening to the sounds from above. Footsteps, water running, furniture moving. At noon, he made 2 sandwiches and took them up to her. She turned, her face flushed from the work. For a moment, she looked young, almost pretty in a way that hardship had not yet erased. Thank you. She took the plate and ate with care. This time she finished the whole sandwich. Ethan leaned in the doorway, trying to sound casual. How are the kids? The question landed like a stone. Hannah froze. I do not know what you are talking about. Martha mentioned you had children. I did not mean to pry. She put the sandwich down, her mind clearly racing, trying to figure out what he knew. I have 4 children, she said, her voice flat. They are taken care of. Is that going to be a problem for the job? Why would it be? Some employers do not like complications. Hannah, I do not care if you have 4 kids or 14. You do good work. That is all that matters. She searched his face, looking for the catch. When she found none, her shoulders relaxed just a little. Okay, she said softly. Thank you. Tiny galaxies. Finally, Hannah broke the silence. Can I ask you something personal? Why do you live way out here by yourself? A big house like this seems like it ought to be full of folks. Ethan thought about sidestepping the question, but her straightforwardness deserved a straight answer. It was full once. My folks, ranch hands, even my ex-wife for about 3 years. What happened? She wanted a husband home for supper. I was busy building an empire. Turns out you cannot do both. He shrugged. It has been 10 years. She is remarried with 2 kids and seems happy. I have got 4,000 acres. I guess we both got what we wanted. Do you ever feel lonely? The question hit a little too close to home. Ethan looked away. Sometimes. But being lonely is better than letting down the people who depend on you. Hannah nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Yeah, I know that feeling. They ate the rest of their lunch in a new kind of quiet, as if a wall between them had started to crumble. That night, Ethan knew he did not have to follow her home. He knew exactly where she was headed and what she was going back to. He knew she would divide her meager dinner into 5 small portions, telling everyone it was plenty. He pictured her tucking those children into sleeping bags, telling stories to distract them from the cold when the fire died down. He knew she would do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, until something finally gave. He planned on being the thing that changed, but he had to move slow and careful. He could not risk scaring her off or wounding the fierce pride that kept her standing so tall. This whole thing he was planning was a delicate operation. One wrong step and she would snatch up those kids and vanish for good. So he would be patient, he would be smart, and he would be ready. Because looking at the shadows in Hannah Cole's eyes, Ethan knew a storm was gathering on the horizon. The only question was if they would be ready when it finally hit. The change began small. On Tuesday, Ethan asked if she would mind straightening up his office. The room was a disaster zone of old receipts and manuals. "Take all the time you need," he said, handing her a key. By Wednesday, she had worked a miracle. Ethan returned to find a system so perfect it would make an accountant weep. Every single paper was sorted, labeled, and filed. He just stood in the doorway, staring. "You did not have to do all this." Hannah looked up, surprised. "You asked me to organize it." "I meant tidy up a little. This is incredible." She looked down, but he saw the faint blush of pleasure on her cheeks. "I just like things to make sense." "You have a real gift for it," he said, picking up a folder. "You ever do any professional bookkeeping?" "I kept the books for a church once. That was a long time ago." Her voice grew distant, and Ethan wanted to ask more, but he remembered Martha's advice to go slow, so he just nodded. "Well, if you want more work like this, I could sure use the help. My accountant is about to fire me. I could probably fit it in. I would pay you $20 an hour for the bookkeeping. It is skilled labor." Hannah's eyes widened. "That is too much." "It is what I would pay anyone else. You are worth it." She started to argue, then stopped. He could see her mind racing, calculating what that extra money would mean for her family. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." That night, Ethan made his next move. He packed a box of what he called office supplies. But underneath the pens and paper, he tucked in a package of batteries, a brand new fleece blanket, a box of protein bars, and children's vitamins. On Thursday morning, he left it on the counter with a simple note. "Supplies for the office. Take what you need. E." From the barn, he watched her find it. He saw her pull out the office supplies, then stop when she found the blanket. Her hand froze on the soft fabric. Her shoulders began to shake as she cried, silent and still. Ethan turned away to give her some privacy. When he looked back 5 minutes later, the blanket and the other items were tucked away in her bag. The protein bars were in her pockets. She never mentioned it. But that afternoon, while she scrubbed the floor, he heard her humming a quiet little tune. It was the first sound he had ever heard her make that was not born from pure necessity, and it felt like a small victory. On Friday, he pushed a little more. He accidentally cooked a huge dinner, a whole roasted chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans. He brought it to the main house just as she was finishing her work. "My timing is all off," he said, setting the feast on the table. "Made way too much." "Are you hungry?" Hannah just stared at the food. "I ought to get home. It will just go to waste. Besides, I hate eating by myself." It was a clear manipulation, but hunger is a powerful thing. After a moment, Hannah sat down. At first, they ate without a word, but slowly she began to talk about the ranch, keeping the topics safe. Ethan answered, asking his own careful questions, and started to piece together the puzzle of Hannah Cole. She grew up in Wyoming, the daughter of a strict pastor. "I thought love was supposed to be about total surrender," she said, her voice quiet. "Then I met Caleb Ross at a church social when I was 17. He was 25 and knew all the right things to say. My father approved. We were married 6 months later." The dead, flat way she said her ex-husband's name told Ethan all he needed to know. "The kids?" he asked gently. "Sarah is 7, Tommy is 6, Sam is 4, and Lily just turned 1. Her voice softened. "They are good kids. They deserve a whole lot better than what I am giving them. You are doing your best." "My best is not good enough," she said bitterly. "Sam asked me yesterday if we could have meat for dinner, just once. A 4-year-old boy should not have to beg for food." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Where is their father?" Hannah gave a harsh laugh. "Last I heard, Montana. Caleb is not big on staying in one place or paying child support." "You could take him to court." "With what money? And for what?" You cannot get money from a man who works for cash and moves every 6 months. She looked him straight in the eye. I learned a long time ago that some fights are not worth the trouble. It is better to just survive. The weariness in her voice hit Ethan hard. Before he could say anything, she stood up. I should go. Take the leftovers, he insisted, already packing them into containers. I meant what I said. It will all go to waste. She took the food with trembling hands. Thank you, Ethan, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. After she was gone, Ethan sat alone in his big empty kitchen and made up his mind. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. Jim, it is Ethan Mercer. I need you to look into something for me. Keep it quiet. What kind of something? A child support case. The woman's name is Hannah Cole. Ex-husband is Caleb Ross. I want to know if anything can be done. Ethan, are you getting involved in... Just look into it, Jim sighed on the other end. I will see what I can find. But a guy like that, the system is not kind to women in her spot. Then, Ethan said, we will have to be kinder. That weekend, he drove out toward the old Peterson cabin. This time, he was not there to watch. He was there to assess. He walked the rest of the way, staying out of sight. In the daylight, the cabin looked even worse. The roof was one storm away from caving in. On the porch, Sarah Cole sat reading a book to her younger siblings, while baby Lily slept in a wooden crate lined with his fleece blanket. Sarah's voice was clear and patient as she sounded out words for Tommy and Sam. She was maybe 7 years old. Ethan watched this small family, and his resolve became unbreakable. These kids deserved better. Hannah deserved better. On Monday morning, he had a plan. Hannah, I need to talk to you. She looked up from the bathroom she was scrubbing, instantly on guard. This is about the guest wing. Ethan had practiced this, trying to make it sound casual. I am thinking about hosting clients here, he began. You know, business dinners. I need someone who can manage everything from cooking to serving. It would just be a few evenings a month, and I can pay $30 an hour. Hannah's eyes narrowed. That kind of money was for more than just serving dinner. He wanted a whole event planner. You do not have any business dinners scheduled, do you? The lie came smoothly. Not yet, but I will. A ranch this size depends on partnerships. She studied him for a long moment. If you are serious, I can do it, she said finally. But I would need to find someone to watch my kids. What if you did not? He offered. What if you just brought them here? Hannah went completely still. I am not bringing my children to your home, Mr. Mercer. It is Ethan, he said gently. And why not? I have 6 empty bedrooms. They could do their homework or play outside while you work. There is a whole library they could explore. That is not appropriate. Why not? She stammered, searching for a reason. Because they are my responsibility. And this is a workplace. Ethan softened his voice. Hannah, I know where you live. The color drained from her face. You followed me. I was worried, he admitted. You are raising 4 kids in a cabin that is falling apart. I am offering you a chance to bring them somewhere warm and safe while you work. This is not a handout. It is just a practical solution. You had no right. You are right. I did not, and I am sorry. He felt bad for invading her privacy, but not for what he learned. But now that I know, I cannot ignore it. I will not watch you struggle to keep your kids warm and fed when I have more than enough to help. Hannah's hands balled into fists. I do not need your pity. Good, because I am not offering it, he said. I am offering you a job with fair pay. If your kids are here while you do it, that just makes sense. He held her gaze, trying to make her understand. I am just trying to give you options. She turned away, her shoulders rigid. In a voice barely above a whisper, she asked, Why do you care? Because someone should, he answered simply. That is not a real answer. Ethan thought for a moment. My father was a hard, mean man. My mother was afraid of her own shadow. I left home at 17 because staying there would have destroyed me. I know what it feels like to be alone and to expect the world to turn against you. He paused. I also know what a difference it makes when one person gives you a chance. That is the difference between surviving and actually living. Hannah turned back, her eyes wet with unshed tears. And you think you are that person for me? I think I could be, if you let me. The silence was full of hope and fear. One dinner, Hannah said at last. A trial run. If it does not work, we forget this happened. Deal. They shook on it, and Ethan felt like he had just won something far more valuable than any business deal. He set up the dinner for the following Saturday with his accountant and his wife. He told Hannah to plan for 6 people, making it clear that she would be joining them at the table. She argued at first, but finally agreed. That Saturday, Hannah's old car, which looked like it was held together with rust and a prayer, pulled up the long driveway. 4 children tumbled out, their eyes wide as they took in the huge ranch. The oldest, Sarah, held her little sister Lily, while the boys, Tommy and Sam, stayed close to their mom. Kids, this is Mr. Mercer, she said. Please call me Ethan. He made a point to shake Sarah's hand first, treating her like a grown-up. It is nice to meet all of you. Your mom is going to be busy in the kitchen for a while. How would y'all like to go explore? 4 pairs of eyes looked to their mother for permission. She hesitated, then nodded. Stay together, she said, and do not touch anything without asking. And listen to Ethan, she added. The boys took off for the barn like they had been shot out of a cannon. I am sorry, Hannah said, wringing her hands. They have so much energy. They are fine, Ethan assured her. They are just being kids. Come on, I will show you the kitchen. When she saw it, she was speechless. She ran her fingers over the marble countertop as if it were a precious jewel. This is beautiful. It is functional, he said, pulling out the menu they had planned. All right, you are in charge. For the next 3 hours, Ethan watched Hannah come alive. She moved around the kitchen with a confidence and grace that was captivating, filling the air with the warm smells of baking bread and roasting lamb. But her work was constantly interrupted by one of the kids appearing in the doorway with a question or a new discovery they had to share. Ethan could see the strain of trying to work and parent at the same time was wearing her down. Sarah, he called to the oldest girl, how would you feel about being in charge of your brothers for a little while? There is a television in the den with some movies. Sarah's posture straightened with pride. I can do that. I know you can, he said, and he saw a look of relief on her young face, as if she had been waiting her whole life for someone to notice how capable she was. With the children settled, the kitchen grew quiet. Ethan pretended to look over some papers, but he was really just watching Hannah work. She started humming softly, and the tension in her shoulders began to melt away. Can I ask you something? She said after a long silence. Sure. Is there really a business dinner tonight? Ethan paused. He could lie, but he decided she deserved the truth. Yes and no. My accountant and his wife are coming. They are real. But I did not invite them here to talk business. I invited them because I figured you needed a trial run before I start booking you for actual clients. Hannah's hands stopped moving over the salad bowl. So, this is all just an excuse to feed my children. This whole thing is me giving you a job you are good at, for a wage you have earned. If your kids get a good meal out of it, that is not a handout. That is just good planning. She turned to look him square in the eye. You are not as clever as you think you are. Never said I was clever. You are manipulative, probably, and you have some kind of hero complex, maybe. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. But I am also right. You are good at this. You ought to be paid for it. And those kids of yours deserve more than beans and rice. Hannah's jaw was tight. A dozen emotions flickered across her face. Finally, she said, I do not know whether to thank you or hit you. How about you serve dinner and we will see how you feel afterward. A small smile touched her lips. Deal. Dinner was a success. Jim and his wife Margaret showed up on time and were taken by Hannah's cooking and her warmth. The conversation came easy, helped along by the wine and the comfortable feeling Hannah had made in the house. In the kitchen, the children ate like kings. Ethan had set them up at the breakfast table with their own plates of everything from lamb to vegetables to bread with real butter. He saw Sam's eyes get wide with the first bite of meat. He saw Tommy eat so fast Hannah had to tell him to breathe. And he saw Sarah cut Lily's food into little pieces while she snuck extra bites for herself. When they were done, they were still hungry. Ethan saw Sarah looking at the last of the bread with a longing she tried to hide. "Sarah," he said softly, "there is ice cream in the freezer. Chocolate and vanilla. Would you all like some?" Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Really? Really, help yourselves." Later, after Jim and Margaret left, promising to come back soon, and after the kids had fallen asleep in a happy pile of blankets in the den, Hannah found Ethan on the porch. "Thank you," she said, plain and simple. "For what? For tonight? For all of it?" She stood next to him, looking out at the dark fields. "Sam asked me if we could live here, said it is the prettiest place he has ever seen." "What did you tell him?" "That we have our own home, and this is just a place we visit." Ethan wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her this could be their home if she would just say the word. But he kept his mouth shut. It was her choice to make, at her own pace. "You are welcome here," he said instead. "Any time, for work or just to be." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then so soft he almost missed it. He almost said, "I know." She gathered her sleeping kids, put them in her old beat-up car, and drove off into the night. Ethan watched her taillights fade and felt the big house settle around him, heavy and empty. But something was different now. A door had been opened, just a crack. The next week, Hannah brought the kids with her every afternoon. She did not ask. She just showed up with them, settling them in the library while she worked. They did their homework at his big dining room table. They read his books and played in his yard with Sarah always keeping a watchful eye. Ethan started planning his own day around them. He would come in from the fields at 3:30 to find Sam playing the piano, or Tommy building things with old ranch manuals. He started keeping snacks in the pantry, juice boxes, crackers, the good kind of peanut butter. Things just showed up and nobody said a word. Hannah saw it all, of course, but she had stopped fighting him on it. She had learned to just say thank you and let it be, accepting his help with a quiet grace that spoke of both her pride and her exhaustion. 2 weeks later, Ethan came home and found Hannah in his kitchen crying. Not the quiet tears he had seen before. He found her in the corner of the pantry trying to choke back deep, painful sobs. She clutched her phone in one hand, pressing the other to her mouth. "Hannah," he said, rushing to her side. "What happened?" She showed him the phone's screen. A text from an unsaved number read, "Found you. I am coming for what is mine." The message was signed with a single name, Caleb. In that instant, Ethan's blood ran cold. The simple threat felt like a punch to the gut. "When did you get this?" he asked, his voice harsh. 20 minutes ago, she whispered, her hands shaking. "I have been trying to figure out what to do." "You call the police. That is what you do." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And tell them what? That my ex-husband sent a text? They will say it is a private matter and that they cannot do anything unless he actually hurts me." "He is threatening you." "He will just say he wants to see his children." "That is not illegal, Ethan. We never officially divorced. I just left." She pressed her hands to her eyes. "I really thought he would never find me." Looking this whole time, her voice was just a whisper. "It does not matter how. He found us. And now he is coming." Ethan's mind was a blur of bad options. A restraining order would take too long. The police could not help without a direct threat. And running was not possible with 4 kids and no money. "You are staying here," he said, his voice firm. Hannah looked at him like he was crazy. What? Tonight? You and the children are staying here. If he shows up at that cabin and you are gone, it buys us some time. Ethan, I cannot just move in with you. Why not? You are here half the time as it is. And if Caleb is serious, I would rather you be in a safe place. A place with good locks on the doors, and a man who is not afraid to use a shotgun. The word shotgun made Hannah flinch, but she did not say no. That told Ethan just how scared she truly was. Just for tonight, she finally agreed. Until I can figure things out. You can stay as many nights as you need. They went to get the kids, who were asleep in front of the television. Sarah woke up the second Hannah touched her. She had learned to be a light sleeper. Mama, what is wrong? Nothing, baby. We're going to stay here tonight with Mr. Mercer. He has plenty of rooms. Sarah looked straight at Ethan, her eyes sharp for a child her age. She knew. Children always know. Is he coming? She asked in a small voice. Hannah's face lost all its color. Sarah, do not be silly. Mama, I am not stupid. Is Daddy coming? The silence in the room was the only answer she needed. The word Daddy made the two little boys, Tommy and Sam, start to tremble. It was a fear deep in their bones, and it made Ethan's hands ball into fists. I do not know, Hannah said, her voice breaking. But we are safe here. Ethan will make sure we are safe. That was a promise he had not yet made out loud, but he confirmed it with a single firm nod. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then nodded back. An understanding passed between the man and the little girl. They set everyone up in the guest bedrooms. He brought out fresh sheets, towels, and extra blankets. He even found an old playpen in the attic for the baby, Lily. There is food in this kitchen, he told Hannah as she tucked her son into bed. Help yourself to whatever you need. The doors are locked, the alarm is on, and my room is just down the hall. Ethan, she said, grabbing his arm before he could leave, thank you. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. You should not have to thank a man for doing the decent thing. She looked at him with sad eyes. In my experience, decency has been hard to find. The sorrow in her voice hit him hard. He wanted to promise her that everything would be all right. He wanted to tell her he would protect her and her children from any harm. But he just squeezed her hand. Get some sleep, he said gently. We will sort this out in the morning. But Ethan did not sleep. He sat in his office with a glass of whiskey he never touched. He was on the phone calling in favors. His first call was to his lawyer, Jim. I need everything you have on a man named Caleb Ross, Ethan said. Police record, work history, where he lives. I need it all. What is this about? The deadbeat husband? He has found Hannah. He sent her a threatening message. I need to know who I am dealing with. Jim was quiet for a second. Ethan, how involved are you here? Involved enough. Can you help me or not? I can help. I will have something for you by morning. And Ethan? If this man is truly dangerous, call the police. I will. Just get me the information. His second call was to his ranch foreman, Miguel. Miguel had worked for him for 15 years and was a man you could trust. Miguel, I need you to keep your eyes open for the next few days. A man might come around asking about Hannah Cole. He is average height with dark hair. Call me the second you see him. Do not talk to him. Is this something I need to worry about, boss? Just being careful. Hannah has some trouble from her past catching up to her. I want to make sure she and those kids are safe. Understood. I will tell the other men to be on the lookout. The third call was the hardest. He called his sister, Rebecca, in California. Ethan, what is wrong? I need your advice. Let us say someone was trying to protect a woman and her children from an abusive ex. What would be the smart way to do that, legally? Rebecca's voice sharpened. She was a family lawyer and a very good one. Is this a hypothetical situation, or are we talking about something real? It is real. A woman who works for me. Her ex-husband just found her after months. She is terrified, Beck, and I do not know the right way to help her. Rebecca started asking questions like a machine gun. Are they legally divorced? No. Is there a custody agreement? No. Has the abuse been reported before? Not officially. Has he been in the kids' lives? Not for more than a year. Okay, she said. Here is the bad news. Without any official papers, both parents have equal rights to those children. If he shows up and demands to take them, he can do it legally. Ethan felt his stomach turn to ice. That is insane. That is family law. The good news is she can take action. She can file for divorce, for sole custody, and for a protection order. But that all costs money and takes time. So what do I do now? You write down everything. Every single text message, every phone call. You help her find a lawyer she can afford, and you make sure she's in a safe place. She is staying at my ranch. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. You are in deep with this, aren't you, little brother? I'm just helping someone who needs it. Ethan, be careful. Men like her ex-husband hate to lose control. If he thinks you are taking what belongs to him, things could get ugly. Then let them get ugly. I am not backing down. I know you are not. That is what worries me. Just send me her information. I will call around and see if I can find a good lawyer in your area who will help for free. But you promise me you will be smart. I promise. After the call, Ethan sat in the dark for a long time. He knew this was more than just offering a job or a place to sleep. This was stepping between Hannah and a man who was willing to hurt her. He was putting himself and his ranch in danger. He should have been worried, but he was not. He felt calm. He felt ready. He heard quiet footsteps down the hall and found Hannah in the kitchen. She was just staring out the window into the night. Could not sleep? He asked. She jumped. You scared me. Sorry about that. Would you like some company? She nodded. They stood there together in the quiet kitchen. I keep thinking he is out there, Hannah said. Every little sound. I think it is him. I know it is crazy, but I cannot shake the feeling that he is watching us. He is not, and if he was, he would have to get through me first. That is what I am afraid of, she said, turning to him. You do not know Caleb. You do not know what he can do when he gets angry. Tell me. Hannah hugged herself tightly. It started with small things. He would criticize what I wore, or who I talked to. He said it was because he loved me. He said he was protecting me. Her voice was empty, like she was reading from a list. Then it got worse. There was yelling, and he would throw things and punch holes in the walls. He never hit my face. He hit me where the bruises would not show. My stomach, my ribs. Ethan's jaw was clenched so tight it ached, but he let her keep talking. I stayed because I thought I had no choice. My own father told me divorce was a sin. Caleb told me no other man would ever want me with 4 children. I was just so scared. She finally looked up and met his eyes. Then one day he grabbed Sarah. She was only 5 years old. She had talked back to him. He grabbed her arm so hard it left a dark bruise. In that 1 second I saw my future. I saw my daughters learning to think that violence was a part of love. I saw my sons learning that this is how men are supposed to act. So you left. So I left. I took the kids in the middle of the night. I just drove until the car ran out of gas. I found that little cabin and I started over. Her hands were shaking. I have been looking over my shoulder every single day, just waiting. And now he is here. Ethan stepped closer, giving her room to back away if she wanted. He is not taking you. And he is not taking your kids. I do not care what the law says. I have money, and I have friends. We will fight him the right way. Why? She asked, her voice full of pain. Why do you care so much? You barely even know. I know enough. I know you're a good mother. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met, and I know those kids adore you. He paused. And I know what it is like to feel alone, to feel like the whole world is against you. And you think you are my help? I am already here. Hannah stared at him, and something in her eyes changed. She stepped forward and pressed her face into his chest. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Ethan held her as she cried out months of fear and exhaustion. Finally, she pulled back. I should check on the kids. Thank you for everything. She gave him a small, watery smile. I'm glad I do not have to do this alone anymore. Morning came with a phone call from Jim. Ethan answered on the first ring. What did you find? Caleb Ross, age 33. 2 arrests for assault, 1 conviction pleaded down to disturbing the peace. Currently wanted in Montana for failure to appear. To pay child support. Wanted, as in there is a warrant out for him? A bench warrant, yeah. It is not a high priority, but it exists. Jim paused. Ethan, this guy is trouble. He has a history. He gets a job, gets fired, and leaves a mess behind him. If he has decided he wants those kids, it is not because he loves them. Then why? Could be anything. Control, revenge. Maybe he heard Hannah has something worth taking. Or maybe he needs them for welfare benefits. Who knows? The point is, his reasons are not about being a father. Ethan gripped the porch railing tighter. What are our options? Hannah needs to file for divorce right now and ask for emergency custody of the kids. With his criminal record and that warrant, we have got a good shot at getting her temporary sole custody while all this gets sorted out. But she has to do it fast. Can we do it today? I can have the papers ready by noon. But Ethan, she has to be the one to sign them. This has to be her choice. I know. I will talk to her. He found Hannah in the kitchen making breakfast. Sarah was helping, cracking eggs into a bowl. Tommy was setting the table. It was so peaceful, so normal, that for a second Ethan could almost forget about the storm that was gathering. Hannah, can we talk for a minute? In private. She looked at Sarah. Honey, can you watch your brothers for me? Yes, Mama. They went into Ethan's office and he shut the door. Hannah listened without a word as he explained what Jim had found and what needed to be done. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. If I file for divorce, he will know exactly where to find me. He already knows. That text message proves it. Filing makes it a real fight. Hannah, it has been a fight since the day you left. You have just been fighting it all on your own. Ethan leaned on his desk. This way, you have the law on your side. You have a record of what is happening. You have a chance to protect your kids for good instead of just running. And what if the judge sides with him? Then we fight it. We do whatever it takes. He met her gaze. But at least we will be fighting smart instead of just fighting scared. Hannah wrapped her arms around herself. She looked so small in his big office. I am so tired of being scared. I know. And if I do this, there is no turning back. No. There is only going forward. She gave a slow nod. Okay, let's do it. They spent the morning getting ready. Jim drove out to the ranch himself, bringing a stack of papers that needed Hannah's signature. A divorce petition, a request for signing those papers for emergency custody, and a protection order felt like declaring war. Jim, her lawyer, was all business. This gets filed this afternoon, he said. Caleb will get served inside of 3 days. Then he's got 30 days to answer. Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. What if he comes before then? Jim's tone softened. You call the police and then you call me. With this on record, him taking the children would be kidnapping. She signed the last page, her hand trembling. After Jim left, a tense silence filled the house. Even the kids knew something was wrong. Ethan wanted to tell her it would all be okay, but he wasn't one for empty words. He just stayed close. A quiet presence she could lean on. The phone call came 2 days later. An unknown number. Mercer, a rough voice growled. This the fella messing with my wife? Ethan kept his voice steady. This is Ethan Mercer. Who's calling? You know good and well who this is. Where's Hannah, if you're Caleb? Ross, you know Hannah filed for divorce. You need to talk to her lawyer. I don't care about no lawyer. I want my kids. Ethan's patience wore thin. That's not up to me. The hell it ain't. You think I don't know what you've been doing? Sniffing around my family? Your family? Ethan snapped. You left them with nothing when you ran off to Montana. Who do you think you are? Some rich rancher who thinks he can buy my wife. Caleb shot back. "Those are my kids, and I'm coming for what's mine." "They're not things you own, Caleb, and they don't want you. I'll make 'em want me. The law says they're half mine. The law also says you owe a fortune in child support, and there's a warrant for you in Montana. You sure you want to do this?" The silence on the line was cold. When Caleb spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Mercer. You think that big ranch will protect you? I've broken bigger men than you. When I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard the name Hannah Cole." The line went dead. Ethan called Jim, then the sheriff's office, to report the threat. But he knew paperwork wouldn't stop a man like Caleb Ross. He was coming, and that was that. He found Hannah in the kitchen showing Sarah how to bake bread. The warm, homey scene made the news he had to share feel even colder. "Hannah," he started. Caleb called. Her hands stopped moving in the dough. "What did he say?" Ethan gave her the short version, leaving out the worst of it, but making sure she understood the danger. Sarah stood at the counter, her little face serious, taking in every word. "He's going to come here," Hannah said, her voice flat. "Probably, but we'll be ready." That evening, Ethan showed Hannah how to handle the shotgun from his office. After getting over the initial shock, she was a natural with a steady hand. "Never thought I'd be the kind of woman who needed to do this," she said after hitting 3 clay targets in a row. "You're the kind of woman who protects her kids," Ethan replied. "If that means learning to shoot, you learn to shoot." They stayed out there until it was dark, until she could load and fire without thinking. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something. Caleb showed up 3 days later. Ethan was out in the south pasture when Miguel's call came through, his voice tight. "Boss, we've got a problem at the main gate. A fella says he's Hannah's husband. He's drunk and carrying a tire iron. Keep him there. Call the sheriff. I'm on my way." Ethan pushed his truck harder than he should have, kicking up a cloud of dust. He called Hannah on the way. "Lock all the doors. Get the kids into the master bedroom. Don't come out till I tell you." "Ethan, please be careful." "Always am," he lied. Caleb Ross was exactly as he'd pictured, wiry with wild, bloodshot eyes. He was pacing in front of the gate like a cornered animal, swinging that tire iron. Miguel and 2 other ranch hands stood between him and the house, looking casual but ready. "Mercer," Caleb hollered when Ethan pulled up. "I am." "Then open this gate. I'm here to see my family." "Can't do that, Caleb." "The hell you can't!" He slammed the tire iron against the metal gate, the sound echoing in the quiet air. "Those are my kids, my wife. You got no right to keep me from them." "Hannah filed for divorce. You were served the papers. You know the rules." "I don't give a damn about your rules." Caleb's face was beet red. "You think you're some kind of hero? Saving the poor, helpless woman? You should hear what she really is." "I know all I need to know." "You don't know nothing. She's a liar and a thief. She stole my kids and my money." He pointed the tire iron straight at Ethan. "And now she's got you twisted around her little finger, probably doing whatever it takes to keep a roof over her head." A hot rage washed over Ethan. He saw Miguel get ready to step in. "You need to leave," Ethan said, his voice dangerously calm. "The sheriff is on his way." "I ain't trespassing. I'm collecting what's mine." "They were never yours," Ethan said quietly. "You lost them the first time you laid a hand on Hannah." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "So she's been talking, playing the victim like she always does. The only failure here is you, Caleb, as a husband and as a father." That sent him over the edge. Caleb charged the gate, hitting it with his full weight. The metal groaned but held. Miguel and the other men moved in. "I'll kill you," Caleb screamed. "I'll burn this whole place to the ground." Just then, sirens started wailing in the distance. Caleb heard them too. He backed away, his eyes wild. "This ain't over, Mercer. You tell Hannah those kids are mine. I'm getting them back, one way or another." He scrambled into his beat-up Ford and tore out of there. The sheriff's car pulled up 30 seconds later, but Caleb was already gone. Sheriff Morrison took his statement and promised to put out an alert for the truck, but they both knew how it worked. There wasn't much they could do until Caleb actually crossed a line. "You've got good security," Morrison said, nodding at the gate. "Keep your eyes open. And Ethan, if he comes back, you call us first. Don't be a hero." "Wouldn't dream of it, Sheriff." After they left, Ethan went to find Hannah. The kids were piled around Hannah on the master bed. She clutched her phone, her thumb hovering over the numbers 911. Tommy and Sam were pressed tight against her, while little Lily slept in her arms, not knowing a thing. "Is he really gone?" Hannah whispered. Ethan gave a slow nod. For now. He knew that monster wasn't done. He heard the threat plain as day. Caleb would burn everything to the ground before he'd ever let them be free. Well, Ethan thought, then we better make sure there is nothing of his left to burn. He felt a chill, wondering if he'd just painted a giant target on all their backs. But then Sarah, with those wise old eyes of hers, looked right at him and said, "Thank you for keeping us safe, Ethan." And he knew, deep in his bones, he'd make that same choice 100 times over. Caleb didn't come back that night, but his shadow hung over the ranch like a bad smell. Hannah flinched at every noise. The kids went quiet. Ethan beefed up security, adding cameras and motion sensors, and got a direct line to the sheriff's office. Miguel and the other ranch hands started walking patrols at night, their rifles ready. It felt like they were getting ready for a siege, because that's exactly what it was. 5 days later, the first legal papers showed up. Jim, their lawyer, brought them out to the ranch himself, his face set like stone. "He's filed for joint custody," Jim said, laying the documents on the dining table. "Claims Hannah took off, is poisoning the kids against him, and is living in a bad situation with a man she ain't married to." Hannah's face lost all its color. "He's twisting it all around." "That's what men like him do," Jim said grimly. "They play the victim." He slid another paper forward. "He's also asking the court to make you come back to Montana for the hearing." The fear in Hannah's voice was a raw thing. "Can he do that? Can he make me go back?" "He can try," Jim said. "But we'll fight it. We'll argue that the kids have put down roots here in Texas and this is their home now." Jim laid it out plain for Ethan. In the eyes of the law, Hannah and her kids were adrift with no real ties to this place. That meant a judge could easily send them back. Ethan's jaw set. "Then we will fix that today." Before lunch, Sarah, Tommy, and Sam were signed up at the local school. By late afternoon, they had appointments with a town doctor to get on the books. Hannah felt like she was caught in a whirlwind. "This is happening too fast. You are turning your whole life upside down for us." "I am building a case," Ethan said calmly. "This shows the children live here. It is strategy, not charity. But it is still too much." From the back seat, Sarah's small voice piped up, "Mama, please let him help." Hannah looked at her daughter, seeing an old soul who knew that survival sometimes meant taking a helping hand. "All right," Hannah whispered. "Okay." The hearing was set for 3 weeks away. Jim worked 18-hour days, digging up everything he could. He found old neighbors who remembered the fights and saw the bruises Hannah tried to cover. He laid out Caleb's long history of losing jobs to his temper and his drinking. But Caleb had a slick lawyer now, a man from Billings who was painting a whole different picture. He claimed Hannah was an unstable woman who had run off with a rich rancher, living high on the hog while keeping a good man from his children. "They are going to make me look like a gold digger," Hannah said one night, her voice trembling. "Like I used you for your money. Let them try. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you knows that is nonsense." "You do not understand," she insisted. "The truth does not matter. All that matters is the story people want to believe." Ethan took the legal papers from her shaking hands. "Then our story will be louder, and it will be backed up by the truth." And if that is not enough, we will appeal. We will fight this all the way. You keep saying we, like this is your fight, too. Ethan met her gaze. It is my fight. It has been since the moment I decided to care what happened to you and these kids. Hannah watched him for a long moment. Then she did something that caught them both by surprise. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was a brief, hesitant question. When she pulled away, she blushed. I am sorry. I should not have. Do not apologize. Ethan's voice was rough. But Hannah, you need to know. This is not why I am helping. I do not expect a thing. I know, she said softly. That is why I wanted to. She gathered her things and left the room, leaving Ethan feeling like the ground had just shifted right under his feet. In the days that followed, the kids began to heal in small ways. Tommy stood a little taller when he brought home good grades. Sam made a new friend. Sarah came home from school with stacks of library books. Even little Lily started taking her first wobbly steps across Ethan's living room floor. These were ordinary things, but for these children, ordinary felt like a miracle. Ethan found himself part of their routine. He helped with third-grade math at the kitchen table and learned to braid Sarah's hair. He got used to Sam appearing at his bedroom door in the middle of the night, asking to sleep on the floor. At first, Ethan was confused. Now he just made sure there were extra blankets ready. You are good with them, Hannah told him one morning. They trust you. That is not something they give away easily. They're good kids, Ethan replied. Easy to care about. Their father never thought so, Hannah said, her voice distant. He saw them as burdens. He used to say that if I had just kept my legs closed, he would not be stuck supporting a bunch of brats. The coldness of it made Ethan's blood run hot, but he kept his voice even. Then he is a fool who does not deserve them. 2 days before the court date, Caleb appeared again. This time he was smarter. He went to the elementary school just before pickup, holding a sign that read, "A father's rights matter." He handed out flyers with old photos of the smiling children. The school called Hannah, who called Ethan. They arrived to find Caleb putting on a show for the other parents. "There they are," Caleb shouted as they pulled up. "The woman who stole my children and the man who is helping her." Some parents stared, whispering among themselves. Hannah walked toward the school with her head held high, and Ethan stayed right beside her. "Hannah, honey, do not do this," Caleb pleaded with fake sincerity. "Those kids need their daddy." "I have changed," he told the crowd. "I have been sober for 6 months. I have a job. All I want is another chance." "Is that so wrong?" "You are a liar." The voice was clear and strong, and it came from a 7-year-old girl. Everyone turned. Sarah stood at the school door with her brothers right behind her. "Sarah, sweetheart," Caleb began. "You are not my sweetheart," she shot back, her voice shaking but firm. "And you have not changed. You are just as mean as you always were. You hurt Mama. You hurt us. And I am not going back with you. Ever." The mood of the crowd shifted. Caleb's friendly mask fell away, replaced by pure rage. "You little brat. You do not talk to your father that way." "You are not my father," she said. "Fathers protect their kids." Ethan stepped between Caleb and the children. "You need to leave now." "This is a public sidewalk," Caleb sneered. "The restraining order hearing is in 2 days," Ethan said. "Until then, stay away." The sound of a police car pulling up was a welcome relief. Sheriff Morrison got out, took one look at the scene, and walked straight toward Caleb. "Mr. Ross," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, "I'm going to have to ask you to move along. Cite you for it, or you can just leave. It is your choice." Caleb looked like he had more to say, but one look from the deputy changed his mind. He packed up his signs, but not before he turned to Hannah. "Enjoy this while you can, Hannah. Because on Thursday, that judge is going to see right through you, and those kids are coming home with me." He stormed off, but Ethan could feel the eyes of the whole town on them, could hear the whispers starting. The poison was already spreading. That night, Ethan found Sarah sitting on the porch steps, staring into the dark. "Hey there, kiddo. What's on your mind?" She just shrugged. Is he really going to take us away? Ethan sat down next to her. He's sure going to try. But we're going to do everything we can to stop him. But what if the judge makes us go? Then we just keep fighting, Ethan said softly. We never give up. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I meant what I said. He's not my father. A real dad wouldn't try to scare his own kids. You're right about that, Ethan agreed. Are you going to be our dad? The question hit Ethan square in the chest. Well, Sarah, it's complicated. Why? You live here? You protect us? You make Mama smile? She looked up at him, and her gaze was steady and serious. Seems pretty simple to me. Your mom and I were not married. So get married, she said, like it was the easiest thing in the world. It's not about that, kiddo. It's about what your mom wants and what's best for y'all. I can't just decide to be your dad. Well, I choose you, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan pulled her into a hug, feeling her small frame relax against him. That means more than you'll ever know. The day of the custody hearing was cold and gray. Jim met them on the courthouse steps, his face all business. Just remember what we talked about. Answer the questions. Don't let his lawyer get under your skin. And most important, he said, looking at Hannah, just tell the truth. The judge will see who's lying. The courtroom was old and formal. Judge Catherine Martinez was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Caleb was sitting at the other table, all cleaned up, trying to look like a worried father. It was enough to make you sick. Sickening how convincing he looked. Jim had Hannah go first. She told the whole story from the beginning of the marriage to the abuse, her voice steady as she listed the facts. But when she talked about the night Caleb grabbed Sarah, her hands started to tremble. Ethan saw the judge make a note. Then it was the other lawyer's turn. Mrs. Ross, you say my client was abusive, but you never once called the police. Why not? I was scared, Hannah said. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Or maybe there was nothing to report. Maybe you're making this all up. No, she said, her jaw tight. It happened. You say you were worried about your children, yet you took them to live in a broken-down cabin with no heat or water. Does that sound like a good mother to you? I did the best I could with what I had. And now you are living with Mr. Mercer. You barely knew him 2 months ago. He gives you a job, a place to live for you, and 4 kids. That seems mighty generous. What exactly are you doing to earn that kind of generosity? Jim jumped to his feet. Objection! That question is out of line. I'll rephrase, the lawyer said. Mrs. Ross, isn't it a fact that you are romantically involved with Mr. Ethan Mercer? Hannah's face turned beet red. That has nothing to do with any of this, the lawyer pounced. It has everything to do with it. You're asking this court to keep a father from his children while you're shacked up with another man. Jim's objection was sharp, and the judge agreed. Just answer the question, Mrs. Ross, yes or no. Hannah looked over at Ethan. She knew telling the truth would give Caleb's side a weapon, but a lie would destroy her completely. She took a steadying breath. Yes, we are. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Caleb's lawyer grinned. So you left your husband, took his kids, and jumped right into another man's bed. And you expect us to believe this was about protecting your children, and not about your own selfish needs? I left because Caleb was a danger to us, she said. Or did you just see a wealthy rancher and use your own kids as leverage to get what you wanted? That is not what happened. Then tell this court how you and your children ended up living in his house just weeks after he hired you, the lawyer demanded. Tears filled Hannah's eyes, but her voice held firm. He gave us a safe place to stay when we had nowhere else to go. He fed my children when they were hungry. He showed us kindness when all we had known was cruelty. Her raw honesty seemed to catch even the lawyer off guard. When Ethan took the stand, he laid out the facts about her job and the threats Caleb had made. During cross-examination, Caleb's lawyer zeroed in. Mr. Mercer, you're a rich man. Why go out of your way to help this particular woman? Because she and her children were in real trouble. Or was it because you were attracted to her? Ethan hesitated for a moment. I admired her strength and her dedication as a mother. That's not what I asked. Were you attracted to her? Ethan looked at the judge, then decided on the plain truth. Yes, eventually. The lawyer sneered. So you saw a desperate woman with 4 kids and thought you'd make her part of your ranch. A ready-made family for a lonely millionaire. That's offensive and it's wrong, Ethan said flatly. Is it? You've known her 2 months and you're already playing house, letting her little girl call you a real dad. I see a good woman and her children escaping a man who hurt them, Ethan countered, his voice like steel. And I'm making sure they stay safe. How noble. Tell me, what happens if this court gives custody back to my client? Are you going to finally back off? It was a trap. I will do everything I can to ensure this court has the whole truth before it decides what is truly best for those children. The afternoon dragged on with more witnesses. Then Caleb took the stand, putting on a big show about being a changed man. I've made my share of mistakes, he said, his voice thick with fake regret. But I'm sober now. I just want a chance to be a father to my kids. During the cross-examination, Jim went straight for the throat. You say you're sober, but weren't you drunk when you threatened Mr. Mercer with a tire iron just 3 weeks ago? Caleb stammered. I was upset. And is it true, Jim continued, holding up a document, that there's a warrant for your arrest in Montana for unpaid child support? That's just a misunderstanding. A $17,000 misunderstanding, Jim pressed? You have not paid a single dime in over a year. Does that sound like a father who cares about his family? During the recess, Hannah was pale and shaking. I ruined it all, she whispered to Ethan. Admitting we're together is the only thing they'll remember. Just then, Caleb walked up, wearing that same false mask of concern. Hannah, can we just talk? Stay away from her, Ethan said, stepping right between them. This ain't your business, Mercer, Caleb snarled. Everything that concerns her concerns me. Caleb's smile was pure poison. You think you know her? You have no idea what she's really like. You mean what she's like when a man is beating her down and telling her she's worthless? Ethan's voice was low and dangerous. Yeah, I know exactly what she's like. Caleb's face twisted with pure rage. Before he could lunge, Jim appeared with a bailiff, and Caleb stalked back toward the courtroom. The final arguments were brutal. Caleb's lawyer called Hannah a gold digger who used her kids. Jim painted Caleb as the abuser he was, a man who only wanted control. Then it was all over. All they could do was wait. The next 48 hours were an agony of suspense. Finally, Jim's call came. The judge has her decision. We need to be at the courthouse in an hour. Back in that quiet courtroom, the judge looked at both of them, her face impossible to read. Mr. Ross, your actions do not match your words. You have failed to provide financial support, and you have a documented history of violence. She then turned her gaze to Hannah. Mrs. Ross, while your new relationship is sudden, it is clear that you have consistently prioritized your children's welfare and safety. Therefore, I am granting you sole legal and physical custody. The words seemed to hang in the air. Hannah let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and Ethan pulled her into a tight hug. Across the room, Caleb finally exploded. You can't do this! Those are my kids! But it was over. His angry words were just empty noise in the silent room. Because she's sleeping with some rich rancher. Judge Martinez's gavel came down hard. You will control yourself, Mr. Ross, or you will be held in contempt of this court. I don't care about contempt, Caleb roared, pointing a shaking finger at Ethan. This whole thing is crooked. She bought you off just like she bought him. You will do nothing, the judge said, her voice like ice. Because if you don't stop, I will revoke your visitation rights for good and issue a permanent restraining order. Do you understand me? Caleb looked like he might explode, but his lawyer got in his ear, and he finally just turned and slammed his way out of the courtroom. Judge Martinez then looked straight at Hannah. "Mrs. Ross, I am also granting you a protection order. Mr. Ross is to stay 500 feet away from you and the children at all times." "Thank you," Hannah whispered, tears finally starting to fall. "Thank you." Outside, Hannah finally let go, crying in Ethan's arms. Jim promised to get all the paperwork filed. "It's over," she kept saying. "It's finally over." "Not quite," Jim warned. "He can and probably will appeal." "Let him," Ethan said, holding her tight. "We'll just beat him again." They drove home as the sun went down, and for the first time in forever, Hannah seemed to be breathing easy. But it didn't last. About a mile from the ranch, they saw it. Thick, black smoke billowing up into the sky from somewhere near the main house. Ethan slammed his foot on the gas. As they got closer, their worst fears came true. The old Peterson cabin, Hannah's first refuge, was on fire. And spray-painted in angry red letters across the side of Ethan's barn was a single chilling message. "This is not over." Ethan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he watched the flames eat what was left of the cabin. The fire department was there, but it was no use. The old building was being burned down to nothing but ash. "He did this," Hannah said, her voice empty. "He burned it all down." "We don't know that for sure," Ethan said. But the words felt like a lie. The timing was too perfect. The message on the barn said it all. Miguel ran up to the truck. "Boss, everyone is okay. Nobody's hurt. But whoever did this, they knew we'd all be at the courthouse. They came in the back way and just torched the place, cabin, and spray-painted a message on the barn before vanishing." "The security cameras?" Ethan asked. "Cut the power to that whole section first. We've got nothing." Ethan looked at Hannah. Her face was crumbling as she watched the fire eat away at her little cabin. Everything she owned in the world, besides what she'd brought to his house, was in there. It was the last piece of her old life going up in smoke. "Miguel, take Hannah and the kids inside," Ethan ordered. "Lock the doors. I need to talk to the fire chief." "Ethan," Hannah started, "please just go. I'll handle this." He watched her lead the kids to the house, shielding their eyes from the blaze. Then he turned to face the mess. Fire Chief Douglas was a man Ethan had known for 20 years. He didn't waste time. "This was arson, Ethan," he said, his face grim. "He poured accelerant all around it, set it off in multiple spots. It was a professional job, meant to cause as much damage as possible." "Can you prove it was Caleb Ross?" "Not yet. But with that message on your barn and the timing of it all, I'd bet my pension on it. The problem is proving he's the one who lit the match. Knowing who did it and catching him are different beasts entirely. A smart man would be halfway to Mexico by now. But a dumb, prideful one? He will be back. Men like that cannot stand to lose." Douglas clapped a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You watch out for yourself, for Hannah, and for those kids. That kind of hate does not just fade away." Sheriff Morrison showed up about 20 minutes later. He took his pictures and looked at the mess, the paint on the barn, the tracks in the dirt, the scorched earth where the cabin stood. "I am putting out a warrant for Caleb Ross," Morrison said. "Arson, mischief, and violating that protection order. We will get him. If you find him," Ethan shot back, the anger sharp in his voice. "We will find him. I have got eyes on his truck in 3 states. The sheriff promised a deputy for 24-hour protection. It was meant to be a comfort, but it just felt like they were living in a fort, waiting for the next attack." The children were quiet, a kind of fear that is too deep for crying. Sam finally asked if their old house was really gone. Hannah just held him close and said it was. But it was Sarah, with eyes that saw too much, who looked right at Ethan. It was him, was it not? Our dad. Ethan got down on one knee. "We think so, honey, but he is not getting away with it. He always gets away with it," she said, her voice flat and certain. Ethan promised her this time was different, that there was evidence that the law would work. But the little girl's expression told him she had heard empty promises her whole life. Later that night, neither of them could sleep. Ethan found Hannah in the kitchen, just staring out into the blackness. He meant it, she whispered. That it was not over. None of those court papers matter to him. He will not stop until he gets what he wants, or until he is stopped for good. Ethan's reply was simple. Then we do not run. We stay right here and we fight. Hannah looked at him, her face a mix of exhaustion and strength. Why are you doing all this? You could tell us to leave and nobody would think twice about it. I would, he said. That is not a real reason. He looked her straight in the eye, ready to finally say the words. Because watching you with your kids, seeing how hard you work, I fell in love with you. With all of you all. And I do not run out on the people I love. He told her it was not about duty or feeling sorry for her. It was his choice to stand with them, because he could not imagine doing anything else. Tears rolled down her face as she just stared at him. She stepped forward and kissed him with a certainty that took his breath away. I love you too, she whispered. I have been fighting it, but I do. They held each other in the quiet kitchen as the deputy drove by outside, a silent guardian over the ruins of her past. 3 days later, they found Caleb's truck at a rest stop. It was stripped clean, but the law found what they needed. Morrison called to deliver the news. He is on foot now, and he has got nothing left to lose. He is cornered, and I reckon he is headed your way. So Ethan turned the ranch into a fortress. He added more cameras and taught Hannah how to handle the shotgun. The children felt the tension. Their games grew quiet, and they started watching the windows. Sarah became the little protector, always keeping her brother and sister nearby. Seeing those kids so full of fear in his own home tore Ethan apart. The weeks crawled by, and they tried to build a normal life. The insurance money came through for the land. Hannah started helping with the ranch business, and they all settled into a routine that felt just like a real family. But even in the good moments, everyone was just holding their breath, waiting. That wait ended on a Tuesday night. Ethan was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass and the scream of the security alarm. Ethan grabbed his pistol from the nightstand and met Hannah in the hallway. She held her shotgun, her face pale but set. He pointed to the kids' room and said, "Stay with them. Lock that door." But just then little Sarah appeared with a walkie-talkie. "He's at the kitchen window. I can see him." Ethan nodded. "Good girl. Now go with your mom." He moved quietly toward the kitchen, his heart hammering against his ribs. The sound of cursing and shattering glass led him right to Caleb, who was halfway through the broken window. The man was a mess, bleeding from cuts on his arms. "Get out of my house," Ethan said, his voice cold and steady. Caleb's eyes were wild. "Your house? She's supposed to be mine." He finally tumbled inside, unsteady on his feet. That is when Ethan saw the hunting knife with its 6-inch blade. "You took my wife, my kids, my whole life from me," Caleb snarled. "You did that to yourself the first time you laid a hand on her." "I loved her," Caleb slurred, swaying. "I just needed her to listen. Wives are supposed to obey." He lunged forward, swiping wildly with the knife. Ethan dodged to the side, a lifetime of ranch work keeping him quick on his feet. Still, the blade sliced a hot line of fire across his arm. He ignored the pain and grabbed Caleb's wrist, and the two men crashed against the kitchen table. Caleb was smaller, but fought with a desperate, cornered animal rage. Ethan just tried to control the hand holding the knife, trying not to permanently harm the man. "I'll kill you," Caleb gasped. "Then I'll take them back. They belong to me." Suddenly, a deafening blast echoed through the house. It was not Ethan's gun. Hannah stood in the doorway, the shotgun raised. The shot had hit the wall, a clear warning. "Get away from him," she ordered, her voice shaking but firm. "The next one will not miss." Caleb turned, his furious expression crumbling. "Hannah, baby, I just wanted to talk." "Talk about what?" she said, her eyes like ice. "About how you would rather kill us than let us go?" "I understand that perfectly now." He pleaded, "I can change. Just give me one more chance." "I gave you 100 chances," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "Every time you hurt me, I told myself it would be the last. I am done being afraid." In the distance, police sirens began to wail, growing louder with each second. The alarm had worked. Help was on the way. A desperate look twisted Caleb's face. He suddenly lunged, not toward Ethan, but down the hall where the children were hiding. Hannah fired the shotgun again. This time she did not miss. The blast hit Caleb in the leg, and he went down screaming as the knife slid across the floor. Ethan kicked it away and held him down just as the deputies burst through the door. The law arrived just moments later and took charge of things. They arrested Caleb right there on Ethan's kitchen floor while the paramedics saw to his leg and the deep cut on Ethan's arm. Morrison came in and started taking notes, his face hard as he looked over the damage. "This is breaking and entering, assault with a weapon, and he violated the restraining order," Morrison said. "He is looking at serious time in prison, Ethan. This is not a custody fight anymore. He tried to kill you." Hannah sat at the kitchen table, trembling now that the danger was past. Her children were gathered around her, Sarah still holding the walkie-talkie and the boys crying softly. Little Lily, bless her heart, had slept through everything. "Is it over?" Hannah asked in a small voice. "Is it really over?" Morrison watched as they loaded Caleb, shackled and screaming, into an ambulance. Nobody was listening to his threats anymore. "Yes, ma'am," Morrison said. "This time, it is over." The trial moved fast for the justice system. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before finding him guilty on all charges. Judge Martinez gave him a sentence of 15 years. He would not be eligible for parole for at least 10. All his parental rights were taken away for good. They knew he would file appeals from prison, but it did not matter. He had lost completely. Hannah cried when she heard the verdict, but they were tears of pure relief. Winter settled on the ranch, the snow covering everything in a clean white blanket. For the first time in years, as Christmas drew near, Hannah let herself feel the holiday spirit. Ethan, of course, went all out. He brought in a tree that was so tall it nearly scraped the ceiling. He strung lights on every possible surface. Presents appeared under the tree every day until Hannah had to ask him to stop. "Let me spoil them," he argued. "They have earned it." She could not argue with that. Each gift was perfect. There were warm clothes that fit just right and books she had mentioned wanting to read. He even got her a new driver's license that listed the ranch as her permanent home. Then, Ethan handed her a small, simply wrapped box. Her heart nearly stopped. "Now, before you get any ideas," he said quietly, "this is not what you are thinking. Go on and open it." Inside was an old brass key, worn smooth from years of use. "It is the key to the main house," Ethan explained. "It is your house now, if you will have it. You and the kids belong here. There are no conditions. Just stay as long as you want." Hannah stared at the key, then at this man who had become her entire world. "What if I want to stay forever?" she whispered. "Then I suppose I will just have to get used to a full house." "What if I want more than a full house?" she asked, reaching up to touch his face. "What if I want a real partnership?" Ethan's smile was slow and certain. "Well then, I reckon I ought to make an honest woman out of you." Sarah looked up from her book. "Are you two going to get married?" "Would that be okay with you?" Hannah asked. Sarah pretended to think about it. "I suppose so, as long as Ethan keeps making pancakes on Saturdays." "So, that is my only value, pancakes," Ethan joked. "And you help with homework," Tommy added. "And you let us play with the barn cats," Sam said. "And you make Mama smile," Sarah finished, her own smile bright and true. "That is the most important part." Ethan looked at Hannah and saw his whole future in her eyes. He pulled her close. "Then I guess I had better keep doing all of those things." They were married in the spring. It was a small ceremony right in their living room with Judge Martinez officiating. The kids stood as their witnesses. Hannah wore a simple white dress that she had picked out all by herself. Ethan wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. When Judge Martinez pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered louder than anyone. Life on the ranch settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. It was a life built on respect and a love that had grown strong through hardship. Hannah took over the business side of the ranch and showed a real talent for it. She hired help and turned the place into a very profitable operation. The children thrived. The haunted look in Sarah's eyes finally faded. Tommy discovered he loved ranching and followed the hands everywhere. Sam composed music on his keyboard that often brought tears to Hannah's eyes. Lily grew into a fearless, joyful little girl. Ethan officially adopted all four of them. The paperwork just made it legal for what was already true in their hearts. They all took the last name, Mercer. One day, on the anniversary of the fire, Ethan and Hannah stood on the empty land where the old cabin had been. He had offered to build something new there, but she had refused. "Let it be a reminder of what we survived," she had said. Instead, she had planted native wildflowers all around the perimeter. "Do you ever have regrets?" Ethan asked her. "About leaving your old life? Fighting so hard for this one?" Hannah looked back at their home, where she could hear the children laughing and arguing about whose turn it was to feed the cats. The sounds from the house promised another normal evening in a life that had once seemed impossible. "Not for a single second," she said, and took his hand. "This is what I was fighting for the whole time. I just did not know it was you I was looking for." "I found you," he corrected gently. "No," Hannah smiled, the kind of smile that lit up her whole face. "We found each other. And we have chosen each other every single day since." And that, Ethan thought, was the real story. It was not about being saved. It was about two people who had been broken finding a way to build something whole together. It was about four children learning that family is about the people who show up and stay. It was about a rich rancher discovering that the greatest treasure he had was the happy chaos of his family. Years later, when asked how they met, Ethan would say he hired her to clean his cabin. Hannah would add that he followed her home and found four kids. Then they would look at each other with an understanding that only comes from walking through fire together. And one of their children would roll their eyes and tell the real story. The one about a mother who fought like a lion for her children. About a good man who learned that the best investments are in people, not property. It was about a family that was made by choice, not by blood. Their love was something they built, not something they just found. It was chosen every single day. They did not live happily ever after, because life is never that simple. But they lived a full, beautiful life together. They lived with a fierce loyalty that comes from knowing exactly what you stand to lose. They lived free from the shadows of the past and built a future that belonged to them all. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.